In the village of Luminoso, where the sun kissed the leaves of the trees and the breeze whispered ancient secrets, lived Amadi, a man of robust build and skin as dark as the night. His deep and mysterious eyes hid stories no one dared to ask about. Beside him, Amma, his wife, was the beating heart of the community. Her hair, braided with silver threads, framed a face that radiated kindness. Every morning, her melodious laughter woke the birds, and her smile illuminated even the darkest corners of Luminoso. The couple lived in a modest adobe cabin, with an imposing mango tree dominating the backyard. Its branches extended like protective arms over their home, providing shade on hot days and sweet fruit in the right season. Under this tree, Amadi and Amma shared their days, dreams, and silences. One night, when the full moon bathed the village with its silvery light, Luminoso's fate changed forever. Amma disappeared without a trace. The news spread like wildfire through the savannah, and soon the entire village mobilized to search for her. Men, women, and children combed every corner of Luminoso and its surroundings. They explored the dense nearby forest, shouting Amma's name until their voices broke. They traced the banks of the winding river, fearing the worst. They even ventured into the distant hills' caves, places many avoided due to ancient legends surrounding them. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Hope, like a faint flame, began to extinguish in the villagers' hearts. Gradually, the search stopped, and life in Luminoso tried to return to normal. But nothing would ever be the same. The void left by Amma was palpable in every corner of the village, in every saddened face, in every sigh of resignation. Amadi, however, seemed to endure the loss with a serenity that puzzled many. His eyes, once sparkling with joy, were now veiled by an inscrutable shadow. He continued with his daily routine, working in the cornfields, participating in the elders' council meetings, and even offering words of comfort to those still mourning Amma's absence. But in the solitude of his cabin, under the mango tree's shade, Amadi kept a secret that consumed his soul. Seasons passed, and life in Luminoso found a new rhythm. Amma's absence became a dull pain, a wound that, though not healing, no longer bled. It was then that Amadi began to show interest in Mai, Amma's best friend. Mai, a slender woman with honey-colored eyes, had been Amadi's pillar during the darkest moments following Amma's disappearance. Her constant presence and sweetness had been a balm for Amadi's wounded heart, or so everyone believed. Amadi's courtship of Mai was subtle at first, small gestures, furtive glances, conversations that extended until nightfall. The village watched with a mix of approval and suspicion. Some saw in this union a chance for Amadi to find happiness again, while others felt it was too soon, that Amma's memory deserved more mourning time. Mai, for her part, struggled with the genuine affection she felt for Amadi and the guilt that tormented her for falling in love with her best friend's missing husband. Every night, before sleeping, she looked at Amma's portrait beside her bed and silently asked for forgiveness. It was during one of these nights of reflection that the inexplicable events began. Mai woke up startled by a cold wind that swept through her cabin, despite all windows being closed. The cold was so intense, she could see her breath. Trembling, she got up to investigate, and passing in front of her room's mirror, she thought she saw Amma's reflection, pale and with eyes full of sadness, pointing toward Amadi's yard. Mai rubbed her eyes, convinced it was a product of her imagination and guilt. But the strange occurrences didn't stop. Her cabin's doors began to open and close by themselves, as if an invisible hand manipulated them. Objects moved during the night, and on more than one occasion, Mai found wet footprints on the dirt floor that vanished before reaching anywhere. The mango tree in Amadi's yard, once a symbol of life and fertility, now seemed to emanate a sinister energy. Its fruits, usually sweet and juicy, fell green and bitter, as if the tree itself were sick with sadness. The village children, who once played happily under its branches, now avoided it, scared by shadows that seemed to move among the leaves. Amadi, either unaware or indifferent to these events, continued his courtship. He invited Mai to walk through the cornfields at sunset, gave her necklaces made of colorful seeds, and shared stories of his youth he had never told before. but each affectionate gesture seemed accompanied by an inexplicable event. Once, while walking together, a swarm of fireflies surrounded them, forming for a moment the silhouette of a woman watching them with bright eyes before dispersing into the night. Tormented by these experiences and the growing sense that something was wrong, Mai began to distance herself from Amadi. Their encounters became less frequent, and when they were together, silence weighed more than words. Amadi noticed the change, attributing it to Mai's natural shyness and the village's pressure. He intensified his efforts, determined to win her heart and perhaps silence his own demons. One night, during the harvest celebration, Amadi decided to publicly declare his love for Mai. Under the torchlight and before the gathered village, he knelt before her, offering a ring carved from the mango tree's wood. Just as Mai, with a racing heart and trembling hands, was about to accept, a fierce wind swept through the square, extinguishing all the torches and plunging the village into darkness. Amid the confusion and stifled screams, Mai felt a cold hand grab her wrist. Turning, she found herself face to face with Ama's spectral image. Her missing friend's eyes were filled with tears, and her lips moved in a silent scream. With a desperate gesture, the specter pointed towards Amadi's cabin before vanishing into the air. When the torches were relit, Mai was pale and trembling. Without saying a word, she ran from Amadi and the bewildered crowd. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The puzzle pieces were falling into place, and the truth, though terrible, was becoming clearer. The next day, armed with determination born of fear and suspicion, Mai confronted Amadi at his cabin. She found him sitting under the mango tree, staring into the horizon. Without preamble, Mai told him about the apparitions, the strange events, and her vision of Amma during the celebration. "What did you do, Amadi?" Mai asked, her voice trembling between fear and anger. "What secret do you keep under this mango tree?" Amadi's usually serene face contorted in pain and guilt. For a moment, it seemed he would deny everything, but the weight of his secret was too great to carry alone. With a sigh that seemed to empty his soul, Amadi began to speak. "It was a night like any other," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Amma and I argued. She had discovered something about me, something I wanted to keep hidden." Amadi paused, swallowing with difficulty. "I lost control. My own hands silenced her forever." Mai stepped back, horrified, but Amadi continued, as if the words flowed uncontrollably. "I buried her here, under the mango tree she loved so much. I thought that way I could keep her close, that somehow she would still be part of our home." Amadi's confession spread through the village like an uncontrollable fire. Within hours, all of Luminoso gathered around the cabin, their faces a mix of horror, disbelief, and fury. The Elders' Council, led by the shaman Kazu, took control of the situation. Kazu, an old man with the wisdom of many lives etched into the wrinkles of his face, ordered Amma's body to be exhumed. With each shovelful of dirt removed, the tension in the air grew. When they finally uncovered Amma's remains, a collective lament rose to the sky. The raw and painful truth was now exposed to all. Amadi was immediately taken into custody. The village, once respecting and loving him, now looked at him with a mix of revulsion and pity. Some called for immediate justice, others clamored for divine punishment. But it was Kazu who, with his hoarse but firm voice, imposed order. "Amadi's crime is grave," declared the shaman, "but it will not be us who decide his final fate. The spirits of our ancestors and Amma herself will guide our judgment." For 3 days and nights, Kazu performed ancient rituals to appease Amma's spirit and restore balance in Luminoso. Incense and sacred herbs filled the air, while ancestral chants resonated in every corner of the village. The inhabitants of Luminoso fasted and prayed, seeking wisdom to face this darkness that had fallen upon them. At dawn on the 4th day, Kazu emerged from his cabin, his eyes shining with divine revelation. He gathered the entire village and, with Amadi kneeling in the circle's center, pronounced the verdict. "Amadi will live," Kazu announced, "but not among us. He will be exiled to the outskirts of Luminoso, where each day he will face the consequences of his actions. He will live within sight of our village, but without being part of it. His punishment will be the constant reminder of what he lost and the weight of his guilt. Kazu's decision was met with solemn silence. No one celebrated, no one protested. It was a punishment that went beyond death, a sentence that would force Amadi to live with his crime for the rest of his days. In the following days, the village began the painful process of healing. The place where Amma was buried was transformed into a beautiful community garden. Flowers of all colors and medicinal plants were planted around the mango tree, which now, freed from the weight of the secret, began to bear sweet and abundant fruit again. Mai, deeply affected by the events, became the guardian of Amma's garden. She dedicated her days to caring for the plants and keeping her friend's memory alive. Over time, the garden became a place of reflection and reconciliation for the entire village. Amadi, faithful to his sentence, built a small hut on the outskirts of Luminoso. From there, he could see the village's life continue without him. Each morning, he watched children run to school, farmers head to their fields, women gather at the well to share news of the day. And each night, the lights of the houses reminded him of the warmth of a home that was no longer his. The only contact Amadi maintained with the village was through Kazu. The shaman visited him regularly, not to offer comfort, but to guide him through a long and painful process of reflection and repentance. Together, they meditated on the meaning of life, death, and the consequences of our actions. Over the years, Amadi and Amma's story became a legend, a warning passed down from generation to generation. Parents told it to their children as a lesson on the importance of honesty and the danger of dark secrets. The young whispered it among themselves, half fascinated, half terrified by the destructive power of anger and jealousy. Luminoso, forever marked by this tragedy, emerged stronger and more united. The village became an example of resilience and compassion. Amma's garden flourished not only with plants, but with new traditions. Each year, on the anniversary of Amma's disappearance, the entire village gathered in the garden for a renewal ceremony. They shared stories, sang ancient songs, and planted new seeds, symbolizing the growth and hope that can arise even from the darkest tragedies. Mai, over time, became a respected figure in Luminoso. Her dedication to Amma's garden and compassion for everyone, even Amadi in his exile, made her a pillar of strength for the community. Though she never married, she found fulfillment in her role as a memory keeper and healing promoter. Meanwhile, Amadi lived his exile in solitude. The years carved deep wrinkles into his face, each one a silent testimony of his remorse and internal struggle. From his hut, he watched Luminoso's growth, seeing children become adults and adults grow old, all from the distance imposed by his crime. One night, during the rainy season, a fierce storm hit the region. The winds howled like enraged spirits, and lightning illuminated the sky with its fury. Amid the chaos, a lightning bolt struck the great mango tree in Amma's garden, splitting it in half. The crash woke the entire village, who ran to the garden, fearing the worst. Upon arrival, they found the tree split, its branches scattered on the soaked ground. But among the debris, shining with a faint but constant light, lay a small seed. Kazu, now old and stooped, approached with reverence and picked it up. With a voice broken by emotion, he declared, "This is the seed of redemption. The time has come to heal the last wounds." The entire village, led by Kazu and Mai, decided it was time to include Amadi in this new chapter. For the first time in years, they crossed the invisible boundaries that kept him apart and invited him to return, not as just another inhabitant, but as part of the collective healing process. Amadi, aged and consumed by remorse, walked with trembling steps towards the village's center. His eyes, once full of secrets, now reflected a mix of fear and hope. Upon reaching the garden, he knelt before the remains of the mango tree, silent tears running down his wrinkled cheeks. Kazu approached and, in a gesture that surprised everyone, placed the shining seed in Amadi's hands. "You, who once sowed death under this tree, will now sow life," said the shaman. "This will be your final task, your path to redemption." With trembling hands, Amadi dug a small hole in the damp earth. Each movement was a silent plea, a prayer for forgiveness. When he finally planted the seed, a collective sigh swept through the crowd. It was as if the entire village held its breath, waiting to see what would emerge from this symbolic act. The following days were filled with expectant tension. Amadi, still living on the village's margins, visited the garden every dawn and dusk to care for the newly planted seed. Mai, overcoming years of pain and resentment, began to accompany him on these visits. Together, in a silence charged with unspoken emotions, they watered the soil and waited. During one of these shared dusks, they noticed the first sprout. Tiny and fragile, it pushed through the dark earth, seeking light. Mai and Amadi looked at each other, their eyes meeting truly for the first time in years. In that moment, something changed in Luminoso. It was as if the sprout was not only the birth of a new tree, but also the beginning of a new era for the village. As the new tree grew, transforming from a fragile sprout into a young and vigorous mango tree, Luminoso experienced its own transformation. The past scars, though still visible, began to heal. Amadi and Ama's story, once a whispered taboo, became an open tale of warning and redemption. Mai, in her role as guardian of the garden and storyteller, ensured that new generations understood the complexity of what had happened. She didn't paint Amadi as a monster, nor glorify his actions. Instead, she taught about the consequences of uncontrolled anger, the importance of forgiveness, and the transformative power of genuine repentance. When the new mango tree bore its first fruit, the village celebrated it as a miracle. Those mangoes, sweet and juicy, seemed to contain the very essence of reconciliation. It was decided that the first harvest would be shared in a grand ceremony, a feast of forgiveness and new beginnings. On the night of the ceremony, the entire village gathered in the garden. Torches and oil lamps illuminated the space, creating an almost magical atmosphere. The aroma of ripe mangoes mingled with incense and aromatic herbs, filling the air with a fragrance that seemed to connect the past with the present. Kazu, now so old he needed help to walk, led the ceremony. With a weak but emotion-filled voice, he spoke about the journey the village had undertaken. "We have traversed darkness," he said, "and found light in the most unexpected places. Tonight, we do not just celebrate a harvest. We celebrate our capacity to grow, to forgive, to be reborn." One by one, the villagers approached the tree. Each person took a mango, and before biting into it, shared a memory of Amma, or a lesson learned from this long and painful experience. Some cried, others laughed, but everyone felt the presence of something greater than themselves. When it was Amadi's turn, an expectant silence fell over the crowd. The man, now stooped and gray-haired, stepped forward with uncertain steps. He took a mango with trembling hands and, for a moment, seemed unable to speak. But then, with a voice broken by emotion, he began. "I do not deserve to be here," he said. "I do not deserve this fruit, nor your company. What I did..." He paused, struggling to find the words. "What I did is unforgivable. And yet, here you are, offering me something I dared not dream of. A chance to amend, to serve, to honor Amma's memory not with my punishment, but with my actions." Tears ran freely down his face as he continued. "Every day of my life, I have carried the weight of my crime. But you, with your compassion, have taught me that even the heaviest burden can be lightened when shared. This mango, this fruit born from the seed of redemption, is a testament to your kindness, not my merit." When Amadi finished speaking, Mai approached him. For a moment, everyone held their breath, wondering what she would do. Then, in a gesture that moved the entire village, Mai broke her own mango in half and offered a piece to Amadi. "Let's share," she said simply, as Amma would have wanted. That act of Mai marked the true beginning of healing for Luminoso. From that night on, the village fully embraced the idea of a second chance. Amma's garden became a place of gathering, reflection, and celebration. People from neighboring villages began to visit, drawn by the stories of a place where forgiveness had transformed tragedy into hope. Amadi, though he never forgot his crime, found a way to live that honored Ama's memory. He dedicated the rest of his days to caring for the garden and sharing his story with visitors, always as a warning and a promise that change is possible. Years later, when Amadi finally passed away, he was buried next to the mango tree by unanimous decision of the village. His grave, far from being a somber place, became an integral part of the garden, a constant reminder of the complexity of human nature and the redemptive power of repentance and forgiveness. The story of Luminoso, of Ama, Amadi, and Mai spread beyond the village's borders. It became a legend, told and retold, each version emphasizing different aspects: the danger of secrets, the cost of anger, the value of forgiveness, the possibility of redemption. But at its core, it was always a story about a community that chose light over darkness, understanding over revenge. And so, under the shade of the new mango tree, Luminoso continued its journey. The village had been transformed by its tragedy, but not defined by it. Instead, they defined themselves by their response to that tragedy, a response of compassion, growth, and an unshakable hope in humanity's ability to change and redeem itself. Each mango the tree produced was a testament to this truth, sweet and tangible. And on quiet nights, when the breeze whispered through the mango tree's leaves, some swore they could hear Ama's laughter, a distant but unmistakable echo, reminding them that even from the bitterest roots, something beautiful and sweet can grow. Has Luminoso's story moved you? Don't keep it to yourself. Share it with your friends and family. Leave a comment telling us which part impacted you the most, and subscribe for more tales exploring the depth of the human soul. Your support inspires us to keep telling stories that touch the heart.